What's up guys, my name is Ace, and today I'm going to be breaking down all of the launchers within Modern Warfare to let you guys know which one is best for which situation, because it turns out with each of these launchers, they're each suited for their own unique role. So we've got quite a bit to cover, and let's just hop into the first thing, and one of the most important things, our damage radius as well as our damage profile. First up, we have the Pilla, and with this one, it has a 7.5 meter range. Beyond 7.5 meters away from the target, it won't deal any damage whatsoever. And at the center of that damage radius, we deal about 135 damage, whereas right on the outer edge, this will deal a minimum of 80 damage to a player. As for the Strela, this one has a noticeably smaller damage radius. It is the smallest in the launcher category at just 5.5 meters. And with this one, once again, at its center, it deals about 135 damage to a target, whereas right on the outer edge of its damage radius, it deals only 50 damage. Next up, we've got the Joker, and the Joker is very, very different from all the other launchers because of its unique lock-on capability, and you do have to be standing a certain distance away from your target, otherwise it just won't shoot. But with this one, the damage radius is 15 meters. It is significantly bigger than the other two that we've looked at so far, and with this, it does 300 damage at its center, and then all the way on the outer edge of its damage radius, it deals 100 damage still. So with this thing, in core multiplayer at least, or in Warzone if the enemy has no armor on, if it hits you and you don't have EOD, it's gonna kill you. And this just leaves us with the RPG, and the RPG has a very respectable 10 meter damage radius. And with this, it deals about 150 damage right at the center, which is more than the Pilla as well as the Strela, it's worth noting. However, right on the outer edge of its damage radius, it's only dealing 30 damage, which is a very small amount of damage in comparison to all of the other launchers. So even though it does have a bigger radius, it's dealing significantly less damage once you start reaching the outer edge. So those are the different damage profiles and damage ranges for these different launchers. One other thing to add to this though is if you get a direct impact with these launchers, it will be an instant kill regardless of how much armor you have and regardless of whether or not you have EOD on your class. Now I want to move into a really important stat, and this is your time to fire with these launchers, because with all of them, you have to aim down sight first before the launcher will go off. You can't just pull the trigger and a rocket immediately comes out. And with the Pilla, this time is 617 milliseconds, which is a little bit on the slow side. Then we've got the Strela at 534 milliseconds, which is the fastest in the launcher category. After that, we've got the Joker, which this doesn't really apply to the Joker just because it's used in a completely different way. But the total amount of time it takes to lock on with that launcher is 1.9 seconds. So this is significantly slower than the other launchers. And then finally, with the RPG, this is 584 milliseconds, which is right in between where the Pilla and the Strela are. So when it comes to those situations where you're just trying to get that rocket off as soon as possible, usually this applies when you're really close quarters against an enemy player. The Strela is your best bet, followed by the RPG, then the Pilla, and then the Joker. You shouldn't be using it like this anyways. As for our reload time, this is quite important as well. Keep in mind I measured from the moment the first rocket fired to the moment the second one was loaded and ready to fire. And with the Pilla, this is 4.49 seconds. With the Strela, it's 4.46 seconds. The Joker is just 2.069 seconds, so it's significantly faster because with this, you just drop one on the ground and then somehow pull another one out of your butt. I don't really know how that works. But then finally, this leaves us with the RPG, which is the fastest out of all the launchers at just 1.85 seconds. So that's definitely a huge benefit to using the RPG compared to the others. Now keep in mind those reload times were without the Amped perk. If you're using Amped, this improves your reload time on all of the launchers. And you can see the values there for yourself. Essentially, Amped will just cut down our reload time by roughly 25 to 30% depending on the launcher. So it does give a pretty nice boost. Now, moving on to the next thing, this is how do these launchers perform against vehicles and kill streaks? So what I did is I tested this against an IAV, a VTOL, and then a chopper gunner, just because those are kind of the more popular streaks that you would see. Well, for the IAV, for instance, it's more so what you would run into in ground war. You would just see those driving around all over the place. But a really important characteristic of a launcher when it comes to challenging kill streaks or vehicles is their ability to lock on to that vehicle. And out of these four launchers, the only two that are able to lock on to vehicles are the Pilla and the Joker. For the Strela and the RPG, those are just free fire, and therefore you do have to keep in mind that there's a much better chance that you're going to miss your target, at least sometimes. But let's kick it off with the IAV. And with the IAV, keep in mind I aimed at the front of the IAV and not the rear. If you shoot it in the rear, you can get a critical damage multiplier, but I just wanted to keep things nice and consistent and look at kind of the worst case scenario. And it's important to note, I'm counting how many rockets it takes to disable the vehicle, because once that vehicle is disabled, it's going to burn itself to death and explode anyways. And that's what's really important here. With the Pilla, this took 4 rockets. The Strela took just 3 rockets. The Joker also took 3. And then finally, the RPG took 4. Next up, we have the VTOL, and keep in mind with this, it does have flares that it will deploy on the first shot that you fire with the rocket, at least the lock-on rockets. And with the Pilla, it's going to take you 3 rockets total, including the one that ends up getting diverted by the flares. So technically 2 that just make contact with it. With the Strela, in my tests, it didn't trigger the flares on the VTOL, but at the same time, it felt like some of my rockets just disappeared into thin air, even though I know I was really well on target and it looked like I should have hit it. So it's definitely inconsistent against the VTOL, but keep in mind, only 2 rockets need to hit from the Strela in order to take down a VTOL. Then with the Joker, unfortunately, it takes 3 shots, including the one that the flares divert. And then finally, with the RPG, just like with the Strela, this doesn't trigger the flares on the VTOL because it's not a lock-on launcher. However, this one does take 3 impacts on the VTOL in order to take it down, unlike the Strela's 2 rockets. So this just leaves us with the Chopper Gunner, and once again, this one also has flares that will divert a lock-on launcher. With the Pilla, this one takes 4 rockets, the Strela is 3 rockets, Joker is 3 as well, and then finally the RPG is also 3 rockets. So when it comes to taking out vehicles, it really depends on what you're going for. I would say the Pilla is probably the most consistent all around at taking out streaks, simply because you have that lock-on ability, which is very important because you don't get the consistency with the non-lock-on launchers, especially when it comes to aerial streaks. And when you compare the Pilla to the Joker, when it comes to just the amount of time it takes to get that rocket on target, it takes far too long with the Joker compared to the Pilla. And this is why I would say the Pilla is the best bet all around for taking out streaks. Now finally, one last thing I want to look at that's really important, especially when you're looking at these launchers as anti-personnel. So you're not using them against vehicles, you're just using them against enemy players. This is their accuracy. Especially in Warzone, if you're trying to pick somebody off at range and you're trying to kind of snipe them with your launcher, which one's going to be the most accurate for you here? So what I did for this test is I just stood in this same spot and I tried to fire at the top of this tower to see if the rockets would hit and how consistently they would hit. With the Pilla, I just couldn't hit this. Every single shot that I fired with the Pilla ended off going either left or right of the target, and I would say out of all the launchers, it was actually the least accurate. And that kind of makes sense balance-wise, because, as I just said a minute ago, the Pilla is the most consistent against streaks, and that's really its specialty. It's not designed to be extremely accurate in free fire mode, because it's designed to be locked onto vehicles. But the next one I tested was the Strela, and with the Strela, there's a couple things to point out. First off, this thing is super accurate. You could even hold your breath to steady. It was originally coded as a sniper rifle for some weird reason, but you can hold your breath, and this is very precise. I hit that tower every single time, basically exactly where I was aiming. And another really important thing to point out here is there's very little travel time with that rocket. It hits the target almost the moment I fire. And that's extremely important if you're trying to pick somebody off that's like running across a field, for instance, because you don't really have to lead them very much with this launcher, depending on the distance, of course. As for the Joker, once again, it's not really a fair comparison because the Joker is just completely different. Of course, this thing is pinpoint accurate to where it locks on, but when it comes to using this against enemy players, you really have to rely on the fact that they're going to be standing still in the same spot, or you got to get really lucky with leading a target, otherwise you're just not going to be able to hit them consistently. And finally, this just leaves us with the RPG, and with the RPG, it's a little bit more accurate than the Pilla, but at the same time, it's still not very precise. The rockets do have a little bit of randomness to them. They'll go a little bit to the left or the right or up or down, and that's just something you have to expect while using the RPG at longer ranges. So when we put all of this together, looking at anti-personnel, where we have a look at our damage range combined with the accuracy of the launcher and our reload time and the ability to lock on quickly, with this one, it's relatively close between the Strela and the RPG. Now, the Strela is amazing just for that really low travel time and super accurate shot, but you need to be super accurate with that because your damage radius is almost half of the damage radius of the RPG. And that's where the RPG's strength comes in. It's got a really good damage radius, so even if you're not really precise with your shot, you're still going to be dealing damage to that enemy player very consistently. And I would say the tiebreaker here is going to be the reload time, and this is where the RPG is significantly better than the Strela, and therefore I would say that the RPG is the best for anti-personnel, whereas the Pilla is going to be your best for streaks and vehicles. And with that, that's going to wrap it up for today's video on the best launchers within Modern Warfare. Of course though, I am interested in hearing your opinion in the comment section down below. First off, which launcher do you think is best to use against streaks and vehicles? And second, which launcher do you lean towards when it comes to anti-personnel? Just let me know those thoughts in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.